why do you sell your stuff on Etsy versus eBay versus a booth in a brick and mortar shop?
My family calls it my superpower. It's my ability to see value in things that other people might overlook. Sometimes I go picking with my boyfriend, sometimes it's my best friend Sue, and sometimes it's my kids. But at the end of the day, it's all about having fun and hopefully just maybe making a profit.
All right, it's a freezing 28 degrees outside, but it is a sweltering 85 degrees here in my YouTube studio. I am sweating, I am wearing a tank top, but I wanted to take a moment to answer the most asked question on my YouTube channel, and that is, why do you sell your stuff on Etsy versus eBay versus a booth in a brick and mortar shop? And I'm going to give you the long answer because, to be honest, it's just too complicated to give you a short answer. So without further delay, here we go. I'm gonna start with the booth, okay? I live in Podunk, South Central Pennsylvania. I live in this little town in the middle of nowhere, and the market here is, to sum it up, is probably considered farmhouse chic, country caca. It's rustic, it's primitive. You guys see the stuff that I buy. I buy mid-century modern, I buy Art Deco, I buy Art Nouveau. I have a very specific style that I look for. And part of the reason that I'm able to go into these antique malls and I'm able to find these styles for super cheap is because it doesn't sell here. It is not what people are looking for. And so these people who do have booths are just trying to get it out the door because they can't sell it. Nobody will buy it except for me. So it really wouldn't make sense for me to buy this stuff for super cheap from one booth, stick it in my own booth, and try to sell it for more. There's no market here for that. Now you guys see me pick this stuff for super cheap, and meanwhile, if you're in a metropolitan area and you're looking at some of the stuff I'm buying and you're like, how is she getting that for so cheap? Yeah, so there are advantages to living in Podunk, Pennsylvania. But that's one of the reasons that I don't have a booth. It's not conducive to have a booth here in my area, unless you are selling the stuff that people are buying. And in my case, I would not be selling the stuff that people are buying. It's not something I would be interested in doing. The other reason is that the antique places that are around here, I don't see the foot traffic in them that would make me want to get a booth. Okay, so what I'm saying is, if I were paying rent for a booth, I would want to be seeing traffic. I want to see a lot of people in these antique malls. I'm in the antique malls all the time and I don't see a lot of traffic. I mean, I see some people, but it's not the kind of traffic that I would be confident putting my stuff in there and expecting it to sell. Like, if I'm paying booth rent, I expect the antique mall to be driving traffic into their antique mall. That means having a Facebook page, that means having a social media presence, that means promoting their antique mall and bringing traffic in. For their own sake, not just my sake. I mean, I want them to thrive, because if they're thriving, I'm thriving, it's a win-win, but I'm not seeing that. So that's one of the things I look at as somebody who's been in marketing for as long as I have is this gonna be a win-win situation? And it's more than likely not. So it's not something that in my area and looking at my options here, I would be interested in doing. That doesn't mean that where you live, it's not something that, you know, would benefit you. I mean, every situation is different and maybe it works for you, but it's not something that would work for me here where I live. So something to keep in mind. Moving right along. Let's talk about Etsy. Let's talk about why I sell on Etsy. One of the reasons I sell on Etsy is because I have a YouTube channel. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I have noticed the benefit of having an Etsy store and having a social media presence, if that makes sense. So it's one thing to have an Etsy store. It's another thing to be able to promote that Etsy store. And that's one of the things that I've noticed, because even before I went full into crazy lamp lady mode and started posting all these videos and really being active, I wasn't seeing a lot of sales on Etsy. All my sales were being generated by eBay. But as I began to promote my Etsy through YouTube, through Facebook, through Instagram, it was driving sales. So one of the important things about Etsy, setting up a store is one thing, but you have to be marketing your store. I'm telling you this because it's important. Okay, so whether that means you have a booth, say you do have a booth, okay? Say you have a booth in an antique mall. You need to get little business cards that say, visit my online Etsy store, and you need to leave them in your booth, and it'll drive traffic into your online Etsy store. I mean, you need to be promoting your online Etsy store any way you can. On Facebook, put a post out like, hey, I just got a whole bunch of new stuff in my Etsy store, and put some pictures up, or on your Instagram. One of the things that I've found about Etsy is it takes a little bit of work. When I was just posting stuff and not like putting any work into it, I was not getting a whole lot of sales out of it. And so I wasn't all that impressed with Etsy. It was just kind of there. You know, I was putting all of my effort into eBay because it did all the work for me. I'd list the item, someone would find it, they'd buy it, I'd pack it, I'd sell it, I'd ship it out, you know, it was done. Like, I didn't have to do any of the work. But with Etsy, I'm finding that I have to do some of the work. I have to do the marketing. I have to, you know, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. I like, with Etsy, it's a lot more personal. It's kind of like a social media, it's kind of like a social media thing in itself, because you can favorite stores, and I like the platform, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's why I chose having an Etsy store over having an eBay store, because I like the platform more. So that's one of the important things about Etsy. I know a lot of you are just getting into this and you're like, well, I started an Etsy store. Just keep in mind that starting an Etsy store, you have to be actively promoting it, okay? If you don't have the time or you don't want to be actively promoting it, then eBay might be a better option for you because it does the work for you. Okay, so we're gonna move on to eBay now. That is why I have chosen Etsy personally, because I have the YouTube channel which promotes my Etsy store. See where I'm going with that? Okay, so let's talk about eBay. I do have an eBay username. I do not have an eBay store. I use eBay to list man items. Yeah, you heard that, man items. Okay, so let's talk about the demographic. Okay, so the demographic of Etsy, without even looking, I'm assuming is primarily female. Primarily. I'm assuming, have not looked, I'm assuming Etsy is primarily female. I'm assuming that there's a lot more men searching on eBay for man items. Okay, so for example, the sprayers that I bought in one of my most recent videos, I listed those on eBay. I did not list those on Etsy because I assumed that that's a man's collector's item. He'll probably be looking for it on eBay and on Etsy. So the sprayers went on eBay. Okay, another thing, the Starbucks mugs that you saw me pick up the other week, those went on eBay because they're not vintage enough to be listed on Etsy. They have to be a certain age to go on Etsy. So they went on eBay. Okay, so there are certain rules about listing on Etsy, and there are certain distinctions that I make about listing on Etsy. Another thing I'll do is when I list something on Etsy, if it's stagnant for too long, if it's not selling on Etsy, I will list it on eBay. But I will list it for a little bit higher to cover the fees because eBay fees are a little bit higher than Etsy fees. So I do have an eBay account. I don't use it like I use my Etsy account. I rely mostly on Etsy. Now I do cross-post some of my items, so they are listed on both sites. And if one sells, I will end the other one or vice versa. And I know that this is kind of one of those controversial things and some people don't like it and some people are okay with it. But it broadens your audience and it helps you reach more people because eBay has a much broader reach than even Etsy. And way broader reach than a booth. So you're kind of looking at different reaches here, okay? So cross-posting is an even better way. And let's not even get into Facebook Marketplace. I mean, that's a whole nother thing that I haven't even began to explore yet. So I can't even give you guys advice on Facebook Marketplace because I'm personally just getting into that. But that, once I get a little bit of experience in that, maybe I can talk a little bit about that. I have sold a couple things on there, like surprising things that I never would have thought I sold. Like these spun lucite, like mid-century lamps. I was like, whoa, never thought in a million years I would have sold those to my local market, but it happened and it was really cool. But I think that really sums up this video. I know that I probably touched on some hot topics and I know you guys probably have a lot of questions and comments. Feel free to drop them down below. That's the main reason why I sell on Etsy, but I'd like to hear your opinions on why you would sell on eBay versus a booth, or maybe all three. I don't know, but that is my most asked question here on the channel, and I decided to address it today. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you could take something away from it, and I will catch you guys next time. Oh, and don't forget, my shopping videos are still being posted over on Relic Recoverist, so if you have time, make sure you go over and check out my latest shopping video, and I will catch you next time. Later.